first off, a change here in spring football. The media being locked out of practices, kept out of practices, Norvell kind of changing his stance on the way that they will do spring football, right? You get 15 practices. There's no spring game this year. And for the first time in his 5-year tenure at Florida State, really the first time in his tenure going back even further than that, because he had similar policies and procedures and processes there at Memphis and before. But no longer allowing the media into practice. And I cannot wait for the comments on this video. But a lot of people, oh, this is good, this is bad, doesn't matter, whatever. I have got some takes here. I've pros and cons like everything else in life. But what's your initial reaction to that?
So I think it's a very odd decision. And I do wonder if, the only person who could potentially have influenced that, obviously Michael Alford never had a problem with it. But the addition of Gus Malzahn, I do wonder, because I know he kept his practices fairly closed at Auburn. I don't really know what his policy was at UCF. You think about when Bobby was there, and I covered Florida State, on the beat in person, and Bobby would let us in the practice, full access. He would let fans into practices and just standing on the sidelines there. And then Jimbo just came and shut everything down.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on wins or losses. But, he had a lot of allies, and he still does, in the media, especially on the beat, those ones that cover them. I bet they're probably split half and half, like, all right, well, good. I don't have to waste, 3 hours of my day every single day. I can just show up for, post-practice interviews. But at the same time, they've been given all of this access for the past, 4 years. And now out of nowhere, he makes this drastic change. And it is drastic because it's not like, a lot of coaches will let you be in for the first, 3 or 4 periods, which is just basically stretching and quarterbacks warming up and things like that. And then once they start getting into their plays and everything, the media kind of gets escorted out. But for him to just completely shut things down, I don't want to use this word lightly, but it almost seems like a move of desperation, just to try and change the narrative of what might be going on, so we can say, hey, this is how serious I'm taking things. Last season was not what we wanted. I'm not sure, but and we talked about this off air just a little bit, but I just do not think it's a good look to change your media philosophy in year 5.
I'll get right back to the video, but first I want to give some love to our friends over at Russo & Co. I told you about Chris Russo and his business last week, and it is certainly tax season. Hopefully you've already gotten your 1099s or your W-2s. Listen, Chris is a huge Florida State fan, just like you and I are. He's been a CPA since 2002. He got his MBA in 2004. He's also got a law degree. He's got 25 plus years of experience doing this stuff. And if you need assistance with any tax preparation, any tax advisory, if you need help with preparing 1099s or W-2s for employees, if you own a business, give my guy Chris a call. His info is down in the description. You can also see it here on the screen. Again, Chris will do his very best to get you taken care of, to make sure that you're getting your maximum refund, that you keep as little in the IRS's hands as possible, but of course, doing everything legally and not getting you in trouble. Chris will hold your hand every step of the way. If you mention that you saw him his information here on Double Fries No Slaw, he'll give you a free consultation. Again, it's Russo & Co. Great guy, great Seminole, and hopefully if you are in need of any tax services, you will certainly reach out to him. We'll tell you more about him as the weeks and months go on, as we lead up to tax season. But again, appreciate Chris at Russo & Co. for their support. Yeah, and you mentioned Gus. I think that's an interesting point of this, because I certainly think there's some validity to that, or potential validity to that. Although if Florida State would have gone 9-3 last year, right, or 10-2, or even really 8-4, do you think this change? Even with, first of all, Gus might not even be here. Let's be honest. But let's say they went 8-4 and Gus did still come. It's hard for me to imagine that if the real issue is not the record, right? The real issue. It's hard for me to think that a 10-2 Florida State team that brings Gus Malzahn in, because things were shaky for UCF, right? And if Florida State goes 10-2, does Atkins get a call somewhere else? Does, do some things? Now he had the show cause, so maybe not. But LSU hired him just fine, so it's not like the show cause was going to hurt anything. He's working with the tight ends. So I don't know. I get the Malzahn, that's how he did it. But again, if this team won 9 or 10 games, 8 games even, I don't think they're closing practices, right? And I kind of agree with you. Like I don't, Mike was very deliberate on no, we're very confident. I mean, he said this. He said this in press conferences. Like somebody shared a clip with me, and we're not going to necessarily play it. Like, that may come out later. But somebody shared a clip with me where Mike Norvell, like in an FSU press conference, like, hey, no, we're very confident in who we are. We believe in transparency. We believe in like we have nothing to hide. Now, with that comes some, don't be reporting on formations or injuries or packages that we're putting out. Like, don't screw us over. There were some rules on that. But I do think to go from, hey, yeah, we're confident in who we are, we're comfortable with who we are. I think it was asked to him after they were either 0-4 or after they were struggling in 2020, his first year, the COVID year. And he said, no, we got nothing to hide. And then to basically say, we got a lot to hide is pretty interesting. I do remember, there was some talk of after some of the practices of just how the team looked and some guys reporting on just, man, they didn't look very confident. They didn't look like they were into it. There were some real issues. No one player was called out, but just some of that narrative that was happening in the season of, yeah, these guys don't look like they give a crap about being out here. I mean, if I'm Coach Norvell, I don't really want that out there. And whether you think he's right or wrong about closing practices, I mean, I can understand it. I wouldn't want that out about my team. Now, I think that it's probably more important for you to fix the problem than fix the reporting on the problem, right? I've never been a big fan of, oh man, the media is letting this get out. Well, I'm not really so much worried about the media telling the truth. I'm more worried about the actual problem, which is the fact that players didn't feel like they gave a crap about being here last year. But I do think that, I don't know that I love it. I don't think it's a great look. I'd tell you, in watching both the way that the Jimbo tenure ended and watching the way that the Taggart era ended and watching the way that eras have ended at UF and other places, one of the first things you notice is that there's a change with the media and there's a change in the way that teams are covered. There's a change in the way that the coach and the program have a relationship with the media. It becomes a little bit more hostile. And I'm not saying that we've gotten there. I'm not saying that, no, not at all am I saying that is where we are right now. But if there's some struggle this year, if things don't start out the way you want them to, say you lose to Bama and then lose on the road to Virginia, you got Miami the next weekend, you got a real chance to be 2-3. Does that media, we've already locked them out of practice, you've already changed your strategy and you've limited them, does that kind of media fight start? I don't know. I'm not saying it will. I certainly, as an FSU fan, hope it doesn't. I hope we go 12-0 this year. I want Mike to win every game that he coaches for the rest of his life. But I do think that it's interesting. And again, not a great look.
Yeah. And I am curious, to listen to see what some of the beat reporters who are, on site every single day, what they think, because that completely changes their business model, right? They're used to having this all access where they can report on things, despite, obviously they're not going to report on if a player gets injured in practice or anything like that, but they are going to report on certain things. And you and I luckily have the freedom of, since we are not at practice every day, we can report on a lot more things than all these other media outlets cannot. But my wonder is, what happens if, a war chant or 247 just gets annoyed and they just start reporting things that, Mike Norvell does not want out there, but that's all they have to report on because they no longer have the access that they wanted. And, they're not going to pull their credentials because you need to have the coverage. You're not going to find any more friendly media outlets than the ones who cover strictly Florida State. And ESPN's going to report anything they hear. I can promise you that they don't care. Sure. So it's just an odd move in my opinion, and I think this could be considered an unforced error on Mike's part, just to completely change things the way he has in terms of media coverage of practice.
Yeah, my overall thought I don't think it makes a massive difference one way or the other. I don't even think it makes a very small difference.
Not in terms of wins and losses, no.
Yeah, not at all. Like I don't, and honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't think it makes a very big difference in the way that the team is covered either. I think that the way that most of these reporters have sources within the program that are not on staff, but maybe they're ancillary staff, right? Like they're guys that don't necessarily have an agenda, right? Like if your source is Alex Atkins, right here is the OC last year. I mean, he's got kind of an agenda that he wants to push things around. I think they have enough sources outside. I mean, I'll just tell you, like that's usually who I'm talking with. That's inside of practice. They're like minor staff members, like kind of low down on the totem pole that are kind of giving you information and stuff, and they'll just kind of be honest with you of like, yeah, this is what happened, this is what didn't. I think they'll actually be able to report on practice a little bit better than they have or more than they have because they won't have those kind of safeguards on them. And so I think a lot of that stuff that was coming out anyway is still going to happen. And so if you're Norvell, like you make this decision. And again, shoot, I hope it works out. I hope we get to the end of the year and we go 12-0 and he says, you know why I think this happened? I think it's because I kept the media out of the practice. I got to be fine with that. Do I think that's realistic? Like, not at all. But I don't know what this really helps. And coming off of a 2-10 season, it very much looks like you got
It's just a bad look. Yeah.
Yeah. If you did this after 9-3 or 10-3 or something like that, like I think people just say like, hey man, you made a decision. You thought this was best for your program, whatever. I think doing it after 2-10 makes it look like, hey, we're canceling the spring game. Understandable reason. We're canceling the spring game. We're canceling media access. It looks like you're kind of hiding something. And when that's been the opposite of what you've done forever, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I don't think it makes a big difference in the long term or the short term of what happens with FSU. You know, everybody makes a big deal about like injuries. You know, unless it's the quarterback and you've got two quarterbacks that are just very different, right? Like a Jordan Travis and
Brock Glenn.
I don't know, Brock Glenn. Yeah, just two quarterbacks that have very different styles, Jordan and Tate, right? So unless it's that, no other coach really cares that much about, injuries. I mean, the NFL is the most successful sports league in the country, and they have a mandatory injury report. The SEC does a mandatory injury report. Like, say even like a Jared Verse was going to be out for you on Saturday. That's not changing the way that a coach game plans. They're still going to just run what they think is effective. So again, outside of like quarterback, I mean, that advantage of injuries not getting out, like what's that good for? Like one play, because once that first play happens and Keon's not out there, it's like, oh, okay, well, we know, and as a defense, like, are you game planning differently if Keon's not out there? Not really. You're still then you're putting your best cornerback on the next guy. Like you know it on play two. So I think most of that's overrated too. Like the hiding of injuries that Norvell tries to do. I don't really know how much that benefits FSU. Like, have we ever won a game because he kept an injury secret or whatever? So like, that doesn't even matter to me, but I don't know. It's different. It's weird. And again, it's just not what he has done forever. And so anytime you make a big change like this, people, we didn't talk about this really quickly, move on. People talk about the beat getting things wrong last year. I know that, I don't know, this may not be popular with people. I don't really care about that either because you know who else got things wrong? Nick Saban and Vegas and, the AP poll got things wrong. Every person that even thought about Florida State last year got things wrong. So the beat getting it wrong doesn't really matter to me. But yeah, like maybe he felt like there was added pressure because the beat put too much pressure on them. Again, I don't think it was the beat that voted them top 10 in the country to start the year. I don't think it was the beat that gave them the highest odds to win the ACC or make the playoff in the conference. But again, the beat, I think, gets a little bit of extra crap there because they are the ones that report on practice. But again, they're not the ones that put the expectations on Florida State. That was, national media as well. That was Vegas as well. That was the AP poll as well. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah, just real quick. I don't blame the beat at all. Because I was on the beat for 3 years in Tallahassee, going to every practice, every game in the press box. And where the beat gets a lot of their confidence from is typically from the coaching staff. And a lot of what they were told last year and the information they were giving was directly from Mike Norvell and his assistants. It's as simple as that. It's like they don't come out and say this offensive line is going to be amazing based on what they see in practice. Because, and no disrespect to anyone against the beat, I never played football at a high level. I got to high school. I started a few games at wide receiver. I caught a 2-point conversion once. I'm amazing essentially, but no. The fact is that there are a lot of off the record conversations that happen that you don't hear in press conferences. So they weren't just making stuff up, they were being fed information from Norvell and his staff. And I think Norvell and his staff were overconfident in what the team was going to be. And the beat simply reported on that. So I give anyone on the beat a pass because I've been there, I've done it, I know how that works.